Hello, everyone, and welcome to today's Grace Presents webinar, Beyond the Beautiful Lobby, an insider's guide to what really matters when choosing senior living. Thank you for taking the time of your day to join us. My name is Haley Wesson, and I'm the Content Marketing Manager for Grace Management. We know that choosing a senior living community is an important decision, and we're honored to be part of that journey with you. Our goal is for you to walk away with practical tools you can use throughout your search, from what to look for and the questions to ask, to understanding the many aspects of senior living that can impact daily life and long-term satisfaction. Throughout today's webinar, we encourage you to submit any questions you may have using the Q&A feature. We do have quite a bit of you joining us today, so if we do not get to your question during live on the webinar, we will follow up via email. And we always like to know who is on the call with us today, so we are going to launch a quick poll. If you could just take a minute to answer. So we want to know who's here. So do you have an aging parent? Are you a caregiver to a spouse or a loved one? Do you work with older adults? Or maybe you're something else? All right, we're getting some of those answers coming in. We're seeing a lot of others. I'm very curious of who those people might be joining us. Mostly others, and then second place is tied between having an aged parent or working with older adults. Thank you for everyone who took a minute to answer the poll. I'm still seeing some answers come in, so I'm going to leave it for just a second so that everyone gets a chance to answer that poll. Awesome. Thank you, guys. To give you a sense of what we'll be covering today, we put together a roadmap for our conversation. We'll begin by taking a look at how senior living is evolving, different senior living options available, and what transitioning into senior living can look like. From there, we'll explore some of the key factors that impact everyday life in a community, including memory care, healthcare and wellness, dining, life enrichment, and hospitality. We'll wrap up by discussing what families can expect while navigating the decision-making process and share practical tips to help you evaluate options with confidence. With that, let's get started. I'd like to turn things over to Kara Latham, Vice President of Marketing and Communications at Grace Management, who will begin by walking us through the various senior living options and what families should know as they begin their search.
Thanks,
Kara?
Haley. Good afternoon, everyone. Again, my name is Kara. I'm Vice President of Marketing and Communications here at Grace. And I just want to do a quick shout out. Today, Abby and I are coming to you live from the bustling community of Inspirations of Mesa. And we have a watch party going on in another room with our amazing residents and Tracy and Garrett and our leadership team here. So thanks for allowing us to be here today. So one of the things that you're seeing today, the whole purpose is to educate you guys and to arm you guys with helpful information as you consider senior living options. But what we're still facing as an industry is kind of a misconception about what senior living is. And so you might think about senior living based on what it was, maybe your grandparents or even your great grandparents, and they were in a nursing home. And you'll see today it couldn't be, it's completely different from the programming to the sophistication to the hospitality to the dining. So we're really excited to talk to you about that and what questions should you ask when you go in and things to consider. So a little bit about my background. I started off in hospitality. My degree is in hospitality. I worked in hotels for years. And then I transitioned into healthcare and worked in healthcare for well over a decade. And so now I'm at Grace Management, have been here about a year and a half, and it's the perfect combination of healthcare and hospitality. And if you don't know Grace Management, so we have been around serving seniors and their families for over 40 years, and we operate senior living communities across the country. But some of the things we're seeing, the evolution, senior living is certainly evolving. We obviously know about the silver tsunami and the baby boomers are aging and senior living is more sought after than ever. We are seeing a big shift, right? We are seeing, again, more sophistication. So things should feel that hospitality is a very, very big focus. Concierge living, what are those, programming tailored to the individual? And then healthcare is the other thing that's changed. We all know healthcare has experienced many challenges and continues to face challenges, whether it's about accessibility. It's fragmented in some cases, but what we're seeing is senior living in general in the communities playing a bigger role in healthcare, in an individual's healthcare journey, and actually playing a role in that healthcare ecosystem, which is really exciting. I will let my colleagues talk to you about that and the expert panelists we have on today, which I'm really excited about. So quickly, I'm just going to move to the next slide and talk to you about living options. What are those options, right? You hear these things, AL, IL, you might hear the acronyms. I'm just going to run through. These are all the types of senior living we offer at Grace Management, but 55 and up is active adult. What we see when we see people going into these communities, a lot of times it's empty nesters. Their kids are grown and now they have this big home and they're like, wow, I want to go and travel. And I don't want to deal with a home and maintenance and things like that, but I still want community. I still want a landing place. So that is exactly what it, entails, 55 and up. Then you get into independent living. Again, a lot of times we see this with couples, aging adults. They're ready to sell the home, they're ready to downsize, and they're tired. I had one resident say, no more chores. I'm so tired of doing chores. And so this is really appealing for independent living. And they want, we know there's a loneliness epidemic going on, and we also know that it is very dangerous, right? It's not good for your health. It's not good for your healthcare costs. And being part of a community is very, very beneficial. So independent living comes in. That's for people who don't need a lot of independent or a lot of services, but they can still take part in dining and have their housekeeping taken care of and so forth. Then you get into assisted living. You might need a little bit of support with medication management, mobility, some daily activities like dressing, showering, things like that. The real goal here, and Jen Fuse will go into that in more detail, but is really to foster independence as long as possible. Then we get into memory care, very, very specialized, right? It should be, what does a good memory care look like? Dr. Ashley Smalley is going to talk to you all about that. And then we even do short-term respite stays. And sometimes you might not think about a senior living community for that, but it is a really good opportunity to try it out. If someone's had a surgery, they're recovering. A lot of times if a caregiver is going out of town for an extended period of time on a vacation or something, and they need a place to put their loved one, that they might need a little bit of help. Our respite stay might be the perfect opportunity in a senior living community. One other type I will point out, we don't have it here at Grace Management, but it's a CCRC, which is really just a continuing care retirement community. And that's typically a buy-in model. So there's a big investment up front to buy in, and individuals can age in place, and it's like a campus setting. Our model, we do have different communities where there's independent living, assisted living, and memory care in one area or on one campus. But our model, it's a different payment model. It's more monthly, similar to renting an apartment. So I'm not going to get in too much to that, but I do think that's important as you go and explore senior living to find out, what does that look like? What is obviously pay is important and on everyone's mind. So just something to note there.
And
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 yeah,
Karen, to your point about how senior living is evolving, it really is so true that it's not your grandmother's nursing home. And I know you love that quote.
I
And it
do.
really is not a one size fits all. So it's so
Right.
important for people to understand their needs or their loved ones' needs, when they're going through this journey.
That's right. And is there a place if, needs evolve? People generally, as they age, need more care. And so we have a particular community in Snow Canyon, Utah. It's absolutely gorgeous. So they have multi-million dollar homes for 55 and up. And then there is a beautiful community right in the same neighborhood that has the full continuum of care from independent living, assisted living, and memory care. And so we see people that move in their 60s, but their mom or dad might be in the assisted living or memory care unit right, across the way that they can walk over to and still enjoy fine dining and aerobics and all the activities that they offer there. So Haley, that's a great point. I will say this as well. It is very easy to get drawn in by like a beautiful entrance, by a beautiful building. And that's why today we're really hoping you can, hear more about what questions should you be asking, what should you be looking for, what are those non-negotiables. And some of them come down to, we hear this a lot. Oh, I could just feel it when I walked in. That's great, but feelings are great, but sometimes feelings are fleeting. And so we want to say, yes, that's important. And then, yes, and what are those, things, kind of the data that I can ask about and get an answer to? We want to make sure you guys understand that. One big thing I see a lot when we go into a lot of communities is the staff happy. And I've heard that time and time again when I talk to individuals. I could tell the staff was so happy to be there. They were engaged. So just a couple of nuggets to look into. One other thing, and then I'm going to pass it on to the next expert on the webinar. But one of the things that's important is the transition. So you finally make the decision, and people sometimes take years to decide, is it time to move? Do I downsize my home now? Should I sell my home now? All those things, right? The logistics. And then we get into kind of the emotional factors around it. And Haley, if you could go to the next slide. So what I would encourage you to do is find out, okay, so once we sign the contract, what happens next? Is there an intentional program in place? One thing we do at Grace Management, and again, I'm giving credit to you, Dr. Smalley, is the Graceful Transitions program, but it is a very intentional 90-day program, like with very specific intentional touch points to make sure people get integrated into the community in a successful manner where they feel like they're part of a community, they understand it, and they are included and feel like they belong there. Belonging is a big word for us. So with that, I'm going to pause because I could talk all hour and I don't want to do that. And I'm going to pass it along. So thank you so much.
Thank you, Kara. The first few weeks in a new community can set the tone for an entire experience, and which is why having intentional support during that transition is so important for both residents and their families. And for families navigating memory loss, that support becomes even more critical. So, to help us better understand what quality memory care looks like and what families should be looking for, I'd like to introduce Dr. Ashley Smalley, Vice President of Resident Experience at Grace Management. Ashley is a doctor of education in gerontology with 15 years of experience in senior living, and she brings a deeply personal perspective to this conversation. So, Ashley, please take it away.
Thank you, Haley. I appreciate it. Yeah, I've been with Grace Management for more than 5 years now, and I've been in this field. And I'm looking at this slide, going, I'm gonna have to start ticking that number over to 20 pretty soon here for years of experience in the field. I was essentially born into this, so I like to joke that I started when I was like 3. But it's been something I've done my whole life. And I've always loved being around older adults, but this really got very personal for me when my own family members started going through their aging experience. And my grandfather specifically developed Alzheimer's disease. And I think we've got a fun picture to share of him. Yeah. So this was my grandpa, William Wagner was his name. And so as he aged, he developed Alzheimer's disease. And this was, as with anybody who's gone through this with a family member, it was so challenging for everyone. And my grandma was his primary caregiver. She was the healthy one, right? And when she had a very sudden illness and passed away within about 2 weeks from start to finish, it really threw us into a tailspin of what do we do? What does grandpa need from us? He was probably 7 to 8 years into his progression post-diagnosis at that point in time. I'd always had kind of a special bond with my grandpa. I was actually born on his birthday. So he liked to joke that I was like a birthday present for him. So I felt like I had a really special connection with him. And when this all happened and my family was scrambling, I said, I can look at communities. This is what I do professionally. I've been in this field for a decade now. I can do this. I know what to look for. And so, because it was my area of expertise, I hit the road for my family to look at communities that could be an option for him. So, the things that really I felt like were important, just kind of going in, looking at things like the staffing ratio and the training for the teams. This is something we prioritize so highly at Grace, is our staff training, because working with people who are living with dementia is a highly specialized field, and you cannot just pluck somebody in and stick them into that role without any kind of tools or equipping them of how to do that and to how to do it well. So that was something that was really important to me to look for, as well as the physical environment, right? Was it clean? Was it dynamic and interesting? What were the programs looking like on that calendar, or were they the exact same week to week to week? Because believe it or not, people who are living with dementia can still get bored, my friends. And so we wanted to make sure that whatever was going on was going to appeal to him. My grandpa was a guy's guy. He liked football. Obviously, he was a Bears fan. I shiver to think about what he would be thinking now with the prospect of the Bears moving out of Chicago. I think about him all the time with that in the headlines. But he was a guy's guy, manly man, right? And so that was important for me to find a place where he was going to feel like he fit in and wasn't this like odd man out, right? Um, I also wanted to make sure that I met the people who were actually taking care of him and overseeing that neighborhood, right? So I wanted to meet their directors of wellness, any director of memory care leadership, and the executive director, right? Those were key people that I wanted to connect with when I was looking at these communities for him. And the other thing that I would recommend to folks is don't rush your time in that memory care neighborhood. Um, for those of you who aren't doing this professionally, you might feel a little bit of discomfort, right? Seeing people who are living with cognitive changes. And I just want you to see them not as people living with dementia, but as people. And then to Kara's point earlier about the team, are they engaged and how is that team responding to those residents? How do they work with them? What do those interactions look like? And so this is why I'd say spend time and maybe visit a couple of different times at different times of day. People who are living with dementia can experience what's called sundowning. So sometimes in the like late afternoon around dinner time, you might see an increase in confusion. So you can have a very different environment in the evening versus the daytime. That is okay. That is not outside of the norm. What you want to look at is how is the team responding to those things, and how do the residents interact with those team members? I thought that was really key, very important as I was going through these communities that I was looking at for my grandpa.
And
I
sorry to cut you off,
That's
Dr.
okay.
We do
Yeah.
have a question in regards to the leaders that you want to see when you go on these tours. Is what are some questions that should be asked to these leaders who oversee care?
Yeah, so I would absolutely be asking them about the training. How is that done? Because I think there's a really big difference between an in-person hands-on training versus a computer-based like video training. So I want to know, what does that look like? Are there any certifications around what your team members are doing? For example, we go through the Alzheimer's Association, so our training program is recognized by them, and our associates have the opportunity to get the Essentials certification, which is through the Alzheimer's Association. So it's backed, right, by an organization that specializes in this. That would be something that's really important to me. I would also want to know, with that leader, what are their qualifications? How long have they been in this field? What's important to them? What does a successful day look like for their residents? And I would ask those types of questions of those leaders.
I think one of the biggest takeaways is that families shouldn't be afraid to ask those tough questions,
Mhm.
because they're making such an important decision. It's important to know, all the answers to these.
Yeah, absolutely. And as professionals, we should be prepared to answer them. Like that shouldn't be a discomforting thing for us, right? To be able to answer those questions. Um, I ended up looking at 5 different communities in the area where my grandfather lived. And there was one that was a completely brand new build, one that was newly renovated in memory care, and then 3 others were long-standing, well-established communities there. All of them had specialized memory care neighborhoods. We knew that's what he needed. He needed a safe environment. We were concerned about him wandering. We had a story that we can laugh at it now, but at the time was very scary, where he actually climbed up on the roof of his house because we had somebody there looking at the roof, and he climbed right on up the roof after him. And my grandma didn't know. So we were really worried about that. And so a secured environment was really important to us. So I looked at these communities, some with all the newest bells and whistles that were beautiful. Of all of them, the one I picked was the oldest, most dated of all of these communities, which I laugh at because there were some that I was like, oh, this is stunning, right? The beautiful lobby. I was like, everything about this is gorgeous. But I just kept putting myself in my grandpa's shoes and said, what does William Wagner want, right? What is going to make him feel at home? And it was the carpet that looked like it was right out of 1996. But it was so clean. The folks there were so proud of this too, of how clean their community was. It had the warmest atmosphere. It ticked all of the boxes, right, that I was looking at from a professional. But then stepping into this role as a family member, I met the people who were so kind, who were so genuine. Um, and I felt like they would understand him. This was the community that also had more men there. So there were men focused programs that I thought he would connect with. And it was really the people to me. Three of the communities probably ticked every box. And the one that had everything for me was the folks that I felt like you feel like you could be part of our family and you will understand who my grandfather is as this salt of the earth, guy's guy, blue collar, country boy, essentially. Like you are going to understand who he is and make him feel at home. So that was the community that I recommended to my family. If I had to choose any of these, this would be the one. Um, so then it was up to my family who were power of attorney and things to go like make a final decision for him. Um, so
And
that was kind of our journey. Yeah, go ahead.
yeah, people might think that, flashier means better, but it may not always be congruent with the loved one that will be living there.
I was going
Yes.
to chime in as well. I know you kind of asked what questions to ask. I will tell you this from a marketing point of view, as vice president of marketing, there is certain terminology or marketing jargon, fluffy jargon, right, that people use. And so I would encourage you to ask if someone says, hey, our program is tailored to the individual, right? What does
Oh,
that mean? Tell me how.
yeah.
Like, ask those questions, and everyone in that area should be able to articulate what that means. And if they're not, then that's just the marketing people coming up with jargon, and we don't want
Yeah.
that. So make sure they can back it up with their programming.
Yeah. How do you get to know my loved one is a great question. How do you know what their individual need is? So I think those are really important things. And for some takeaway items, like we wanted to give you some things that you could look for. And I think, Haley, you're going to send this out to it afterwards as well. So you have some takeaway items. So our memory care at Grace is called the Village Program. It's a program I'm really proud of. I created it for our company, and we continue to make it better. Every couple of years we go through, we make sure that it's the most up to date, that it is the most research based that it can be. So these are just some option or some aspects that I would look at in memory care. I won't go through these one on one, but it's really based around how would I also build the program. And I feel like I have a benchmark, right, of what my expectations are, and I would expect that any place that I was going to put someone who I loved, right, and find a new home for them, that it would meet all of this criteria as well.
Yes, thank you, Ashley. And like Ashley said, for anyone that needs to look back on this information, this webinar is being recorded and will be made available on demand. So by any means, we're happy to have to be able to provide you with that as well. Next, we're going to shift our focus to healthcare and wellness. And joining us is Jen Fuse, Senior Regional Director of Clinical Operations at Grace Management. Jen is a licensed practical nurse with more than 20 years of experience in senior living and healthcare and brings a wealth of clinical and operational experience.
Thanks so much, Haley. Hey, everyone. As Haley said, I'm Jen. I have been with Grace for the last 7 years, supporting our communities across multiple states. Before moving into my current role, I served as both a wellness director and an executive director. So I've had the opportunity to experience senior living from both the clinical side and the operational side. What I love most about this work is being able to help our seniors live with dignity, purpose, and maintain the most independence that they can for as long as possible. It's incredibly rewarding, and I just love what I do. So thank you for having me. Okay, thank you. Yeah, so one of the questions I hear so often from families is what exactly is an assessment and why is it so important? So the assessment is really the foundation of everything that we do. It's much, much more than just checking a box and moving through a process before somebody moves in. We're taking the time to really understand the whole person, their physical health, cognitive abilities, their daily routines, their preferences, and any support that they may need to be successful in our communities. We do look at things like mobility, medications, personal care needs, their health history, but we're also looking beyond just the medical side. We want to understand what quality of life truly looks like for that individual. And the goal isn't to find reasons, that someone can't move in. The goal is really to determine how we can best support the resident and whether our community is the right fit for their needs, both, today and then as those needs may change over time. So a thorough assessment really helps us create an individualized plan of care that ensures the residents and their loved ones know what to expect, and it sets everybody up for success from day one. At Grace, we complete an assessment. So before a resident moves in, again at move-in, 30 days after move-in, so that we can do a check-in to see how everything has gone initially, shortly after move-in. And then we do another evaluation 6 months later, or if a resident has a change in condition, we will complete an evaluation at that time too. At Grace, we utilize a point-based care model. So what that means is that residents aren't paying for care and services that they don't need. Our assessment helps create an individualized care plan so that the residents aren't just charged for the services, so that they're only charged for the services that and the support that they actually require. So it's a great approach, and rather than taking a one-size-fits-all, it's a very individualized and personal approach.
Thank you, Jenna. We did actually receive 2 questions about getting assessed. So the first one is, does everyone get assessed before moving in? And then is there any financial obligation in order to have an assessment done? So those are the 2 questions.
Really good questions. So everyone that is moving into either our an assisted living community or a memory care neighborhood, they always do get assessed before move-in. Now, there are times that our sales teams may be working with a resident that prefers to live in independent living. And if ever there are concerns about the resident being able to live independently in an apartment without support, our wellness directors do and will get involved at that time, just to make sure that and help the resident make the best choice.
Awesome.
And sorry, the second question was, is there a fee for an evaluation?
Yes.
At Grace Management? No, there is not. There is not a fee, and there's not a requirement to put a deposit down in order for our wellness director to complete an evaluation. Really good question.
Awesome. I think it's so important for families to understand that an assessment isn't a test to pass or fail. It's really just ensuring that the right support is in place from day one.
Absolutely. Mm-hmm. Okay. So what to look for when touring a senior living community. So as Dr. Ashley said, when families are touring senior living, it's easy to focus on what they, see immediately. And that's, the beauty of maybe a new community, all of the bells and whistles. Those things are important, but they're only really a part of the picture. I always encourage families to, really look a little deeper, ask the questions about the care and support that happens behind the scenes. For example, the assessment process. Does the community really take the time to truly understand the resident before they move in? How are their care plans developed and updated? Because residents' needs, they change over time. And it's important to know what the process in place is to recognize those changes and adjust the care plan accordingly. Communication is another big one. I mean, you've got to feel comfortable with the team that is going to be caring for your loved one. They're going to be a partner in care, and you need to be comfortable with, with the folks that are going to be providing that care. Another, I think, really important thing to ask is about what clinical support services are available. So asking about the resources, like visiting physicians, nurse practitioners, and therapy services, and other healthcare professionals who regularly, visit the community. It can be a really big bonus, I think, when communities offer those services, because it takes away some of the stress and inconvenience that can come up with, having to make frequent trips outside of the community. So let's see what else.
And do you work with residents' healthcare providers as well?
Absolutely, yes. So at Grace, all of our communities partner with outside providers that are visiting practitioners that come in to the community, but we also work with residents, established practitioners that they have before that they move into the community. We've also made great, partnerships with physicians, both ones that have visited or others that we've met through residents that move into our communities. I know that we receive referrals from a lot of physicians at many of our communities.
Awesome. Thank you.
Yeah. So, okay. Sorry. Oh, last slide. Yes. So at Grace, we believe wellness is so much more than just about medical care. It's really about supporting the whole person. When people think about senior living, sometimes they do focus on the healthcare component, but healthy aging involves so much more than that. It's about maintaining strength and mobility, building meaningful relationships, staying engaged, and finding purpose each day. So our philosophy at Grace is centered around a holistic approach. Um, and one area that plays a really significant role in that is nutrition. So with that, I'd like to turn it over to Max, our National Director of Dining.
Really quick before we turn it over to Max,
Yeah.
I just have a quick resident success story that I want to add, just because of, how important it is, wellness programs and everything. So it does remind me of one resident in one of our communities who moved in using a cane and shared that his goal is to one day walk without it. Through regular participation in fitness classes and through ongoing encouragement with the team, he was able to gradually like build up his strength and confidence, and now he is walking cane free. So it's so amazing to see like what fitness programs and wellness programs and everything like that can help and change in someone's life. So that was so awesome. So I just wanted to share that.
Thank you.
And yes, as Jen just discussed, nutrition does play an important role in supporting overall health and wellness. But dining in senior living is much more about just what's on the plate. So
Mhm.
joining us to discuss dining is Max Roskina, National Director of Dining Services at Grace Management. He brings more than 30 years of experience in food and beverage operations, hospitality, and dining services, along with an extensive senior living experience, and a passion for creating exceptional dining experiences for residents. So, Max, I will turn it over to you.
All right. Thank you, Haley. Thanks for having me on. And first of all, I'm in Chicago this week, and I'm currently at our beautiful Hallmark community here, overseeing Lakeshore Drive and Lake Michigan. So it's a wonderful place to be. Something Kara said earlier that kind of resonated with me when I came in the door today. She said something, are they having fun? That's a big something. That has a lot to do with the culture that's happening within that building. So I didn't know this was happening today, but it is, and they are celebrating the 32nd anniversary for our dining room manager here at the Hallmark today. He's been here 32 years, and that's quite possibly our most tenured associate in all of Grace Management, over 5,000 associates. So it's
Nice.
really just the fact knowing that today just lifted my spirits, and I was like, wow, how cool is that?
Yeah.
And if I was touring this place with my folks, that would be something that would resonate with them. People don't stay at a job for that long a period of time if there wasn't something that was keeping them there. Um, and so I kind of, a lot of things were said today, and I was listening to Dr. Ashley earlier, and that I was putting myself in those shoes too. So going back about 5 years ago, we were looking for a senior living facility for my folks at that time, and everything that Ashley said, we were in the same boat. We were looking at, my dad was declining, so we were looking at options. And it was more so related towards care. So a lot was Jen was saying, it was related to all those aspects that care had to do with what was going to fit my dad's needs at that particular time. Now, care wasn't the only thing, of course, because there's a lot of everything else that's going on within the four walls of the building, the activities and the involvement and the social interaction, and of course dining. Okay, so that's where I come in here. So we'll talk about dining. Um, Dining's such a big part. Dining is a big role in that decision-making process. And again, like Ashley was saying, she had a particular community she was looking at. So I was sort of in the same boat. I was leaning towards one particular community. It was really nicer. It had the white tablecloths and the rolled silverware and the white cloth napkins and the white, it was just really, really nice community. My mom, that was a little too stuffy. Okay. And that's fine. At the end of the day, it was her decision. And, 4 years, 4.5 years into it now, she made the right decision because the care and the folks that are taking care of them are second to none, are second to none. And so dining plays a big part in that. So going through some of the aspects and some of the things we look at in dining, nutritional quality and health support, seeking a balanced, nutrient-rich meal that supports aging needs, high protein, fiber, calcium, hydration. Those are all things that we look for in a quality dining program. Variety and flavor. Yeah, who doesn't want variety? We all go out to eat the dinner for variety, whether it's Chinese or Asian or Italian or whatever the case may be. Variety plays a role. So all of our dining programs, that's a big part. So that's something you should look at is what kind of variety is offered in that dining room. Is there cultural diversity in the menus that are offered? Okay, that is a big selling point right there. That kind of breaks the monotony of a boring diet. Seasonal menus, theme nights, international cuisine. We celebrate, food brings a lot of people together. We just came off Father's Day, a huge Father's Day celebration at all of our buildings this past week. And really looking at the last 3 or 4 months, we celebrated Mother's Day, we had Easter, St. Patrick's Day, Valentine's, and the list goes on and on and on. But again, food brings people together. The meal period brings people together. The dining environment and ambiance. How comfortable is the environment? How inviting is the space? And again, it comes down to not what you were thinking, but your loved one. And I learned that myself personally. It wasn't what I was thinking. It's more so what they wanted. Nonetheless, we found the common ground. We found the right thing. Social and emotional benefits. When my parents were at home, it got to a point where there was that social interaction that was missing. And coming to a senior living facility provided that social interaction. So coming to the dining room brought people together. It supports mood, it supports connection, supports belonging. So those social environments play a big role in that decision-making process, and food has a lot to do with that too. Personalization and flexibility. Flexible meal plans. Everyone eats a little differently. Some people eat 2 meals a day. Some people eat 3 meals a day. Some people snack throughout the day. I'm sure if we take a poll, we have 5 different answers here. So again, flexibility is important. At our Grace communities, we have all day dining and we have breakfast, lunch, and dinner, and throughout the day. So that's a big selling point. Accessibility and convenience, easy access to meals, pickup options. Do we have in-room service? Is that available? Grab and go, is that an option that's available? So again, it's a matter of what options are available and what's best suited for your loved one.
And I think dining is one of those areas where families often underestimate its impact because it may be about nutrition, but it's about so much more than that. It's also, a source of routine and social connection and enjoyment and everything that you had just mentioned. So it's definitely something to not take lightly and to definitely take into consideration when touring senior living for sure.
Absolutely.
I wanted to jump in on that for Max, if you don't mind.
Yes.
I want to commend you too with the work that Max has done with the dining teams in memory care, because if you are looking for a memory care neighborhood, you should be getting the same gorgeous quality of food that they're serving in any other dining room in that community. And Max has worked incredibly hard with the teams at Grace. Our altered textured items. They come out beautifully presented, which makes a huge impact on nutrition for people who are living with dementia. So thank you for that, Max. And I just wanted to throw that in there.
No, thank you, Ashley. Ashley and I partner in a lot of these programs, and and really all of us across all of our panels, we all partner together. Um, uh, Jennifer Boyer is going to be following me in a moment here, with our activities and resident engagement, and there's so much. So. For example, if we do um, Italian night in the dining room, it's not just Italian night in the dining room; it's Italian night in the whole community. And so we have activities that are geared towards those things, and that happens in memory care as well. It's not just an independent living or assisted living. We look at this community wide, and so that again, that's a big part of what we do.
Awesome. Thank you, Max.
Yeah, no, thank you. So, what is graceful dining? Graceful dining, the definition of graceful dining for us is home style culinary experience in a warm and inviting environment. So, what does that mean? Quality food. We discussed that a little bit earlier, but we have seasonal menus, and we get all of our food from reputable purveyors. That's a big part to see that we are getting the quality. Scratch cooking is a big part of what we do. our dining directors across our buildings. They're trained chefs. We have many trained chefs. We have folks that have come from the restaurants. We've come from other senior living facilities, come from the hotel industry. Those are pretty much the three areas that we recruit from, and that where our primary leaders come from in our communities. Food for all preferences. We cater to all kinds of tastes and preferences, from sugar-free, gluten-sensitive, vegetarian diets, texture-modified diets, low carb. There's a whole variety of options. So it goes back to a little bit what Jen Fuse was saying earlier. It's not a one size fits all. We do customize, we cater to it, and we see what we can do to accommodate those specific needs of your residents. So. My parents are diabetic, and the diabetic diets were very important, and so that was something that I can't always expect them to make the right decision, but if the staff knows about it, that they can assist in that process. At the end of the day, it's still the resident's choice, and we respect the resident's choice, because at the end of the day, if Mr. Jones wants an extra scoop of cinnamon ice cream on his warm apple pie, so be it. Or if Mrs. Jones doesn't care for broccoli, she doesn't need to eat a broccoli. So again, we're here to customize and cater to any kind of nutritional needs they have. Food when they want it. Again, it's available whenever you want it, at all of our different types of venues. Graceful dining. We offer different kinds of graceful dining. What's part of graceful dining? Of course, the restaurant style dining is the primary. And we take a lot of pride to see that it is restaurant style and not institutional. We do have the menus, and we have always available menus. Always available menus are really catered to the demographic. And what that basically means, across Grace Management, where we got communities going from Boise, Idaho to the Atlantic, down to Florida and Arizona and everywhere in between. The folks in the Northeast and Southeastern Florida, they consume and demand more seafood. So we go through more seafood, and that's on the menus. Our residents in the Midwest, they prefer the comfort foods. That you see a lot more of that on your always available menu. Folks in Texas and in the Southwest, you'll see a lot of Tex-Mex, you see a lot of Cajun, a lot of Southwestern flair. Those are very much a part of. So we customize these menus to the demographic in order to cater to what's best for them. So it's not a prescribed diet that's institutional, because there is some of that out there. Well, we're certainly not that. We're on the other side of that spectrum.
And as a family member that might be touring a community, and not specific to a Grace community, but just any community, what should they expect that dining experience to look and feel like?
At the end of the day, what's comfortable for them. Okay, what's comfortable for them, and I say that on purpose. So again, I'm relating my parents' experience, and what was comfortable for me was not comfortable for my mom. And so if your loved one wants to see that 3-4 course meal that's catered to them in a sit down white tablecloth setting, that's great. Or if they prefer the option sometimes to eat in a bistro setting that's a little more casual, perhaps more enjoyable to them, is that option available to them? Are there days where they want to have in-room dining and room service? Is that available to them? So I think that's a very loaded question, but I think that's a very qualifying question that needs to be asked, and it's answered differently by each individual.
Yeah, it's definitely that whole same thing with like one size doesn't fit all.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Yep. So summing up the graceful dining experience, we have chef-driven cuisine. Again, it goes back to seasonal menus, where our dining directors are making the menus, catering to our demographic. Nutritional balance. How comforting is that to know that the menu that's provided is signed off by a dietitian? Basically, it is nutritionally balanced. And how is that such a big decision-making process where you check that box in a sense that that nutrition piece is there. Choice and flexibility. That's such a big piece. What, like Halo was asking, what exactly does that look like to someone, and how is that going to matter to them most? Resident inspired. What that is, we have meetings with our residents. All of our dining directors meet with our residents, and that's how they put the menus together. They put the menus together, and then they take resident feedback, and any suggestions residents have, we'll make those changes on that menu. So if Mrs. Jones again says, you know what, I've not had seared tuna in a while, and if she makes that recommendation, and we'll have it on that menu that following week. Go back to that connection community piece again, theme dining events, restaurant where we partner with the other departments to see that that's a big part. The restaurant style hospitality is a big part, and encouraging social engagement. A lot of times that's a big part. And when you first get there, how welcome do you feel? And that has everything to do with everything. And that a lot of times that's a decision-making factor more so than some of the other things we discussed here today.
I
Thank
I
you,
wanted
Matt.
to chime in. I think when we were preparing for this is really interesting. And Dr. Smalley, I think you may have said this, but it's interesting as an adult child if I'm looking for my loved one, my mom or something. What is she currently eating, right? And comparing that. So, sit down when you go into the community, sit down and have a meal. Ask them if you can stay for lunch. They should invite you for lunch or dinner, but have a meal and then think about it. Like, is your loved one, they're likely eating a lot of frozen meals or canned meals, or maybe not very frequently at all, or ensure, and kind of compare that to where they're getting this level of variety and intentionality around the nutritional value and so forth. So I think it's interesting to kind of frame it in that way. What are mom and dad currently eating and what's being offered here? So, Ashley, if you want to say anything else on that, but I think you were the one that we were kind of talking that through with.
Yeah, no, I think that's a great perspective. I think the flexibility of it too is really important, which Max pointed out of, I don't always eat breakfast. Sometimes I eat my first meal at like 11, right? And so not being like forced into a box with the meal experience is also really important. And the same again for memory care, which is the perspective I'm coming at it from here today. Super, super important that they're going to have food 24 hours a day. They're going to be able to cater to your loved one's routine. And what it is at home is huge.
Thank you. Joining us next is Jennifer Boyer, National Director of Resident Experience at Grace Management. Jennifer leads the development and enhancement of resident programming across our communities and is passionate about creating experiences that enrich daily life and foster meaningful connections.
Hello, thank you so much for allowing me to join today. Always so happy to speak to the resident engagement experience in our communities. It is a very deep passion of mine, based on my past experience of my mom working in a nursing home her entire career, which established a really negative tone for me. But that now fuels my passion and drive and excitement for helping to develop very engaging programs for our teams across the country. I work with our life enrichment teams in our independent and assisted living communities and our active adult community, as well as our concierge teams nationwide. And my background is primarily in training and professional development, as well as team building. And more than anything, I just love to bring joy to the lives of others. So, with that, I would love to share about what you should look for in, the fun side, the hospitality side of your search for the perfect senior living community for your loved ones. So, I'm going to talk about the beautiful lobby for just a moment because what a great thing to be able to experience when you walk into that beautiful space. And it does go much deeper than just what you see. So, really taking in that first impression on a much deeper level, paying a close attention to what you experience when you walk through the door. So, this is going to signal a lot about the community's culture. So, were you greeted quickly within walking into the community? Was the individual who welcomed you, were they warm? Do they feel unhurried? Were they genuinely glad that you were there? Or were they heads down working, distracted, or maybe not even there for 10, 15 minutes? I always want to put the little caveat, there's a lot of things that go on in our community. So you could have just caught them at a bad time, or maybe they stepped away to handle something for a resident. But really, how did you feel when you first walked in the community is important, as well as all the other things we're going to talk about here. So, looking at the actual physical space, is it clean? Is it a place that when you come in to meet your loved one, you'd be comfortable just sitting down in, having a conversation? Is the environment itself welcoming? Calm, or is it cluttered and chaotic? So that first impression really does have a big impact on the experience you have. So and also all of those factors come into play of helping you recognize whether hospitality is actually a value in that community or if it's a talking point, which we hear of so much in this industry. So, you know, ask yourself, like, is this a place I want to come and visit my loved one and spend time in? That goes beyond the beautiful lobby. It's everything else you experience there.
And going back to Ash's experience when she was storing the communities for her grandfather, it's really, the people and the interactions and you experience during those first few moments, the first 60 seconds you walk through the door, those experiences really tell you so much about a community's culture.
Absolutely, absolutely. And speaking of culture, life enrichment, often is, just called activities or, the things to do. But really, the life enrichment department really is the culture of the community, builds a lot of that foundation for what the culture becomes in that community. So it's just such an important part of the experience for so many of our residents. You shouldn't just look at it as the schedule of activities. You should really feel that heartbeat throughout your entire time in the community, in addition to what you see as the actual activity. So, as you're stepping in and looking at the program, looking at the calendar, ask yourself, does this programming reflect who the residents in this community are, or what someone assumes a senior would be interested in experiencing in a community? So some green flags you can look for is, are there opportunities to learn and explore? Do residents have roles and responsibilities that they can actually contribute to that culture of the community? Other outlets for self-expression, and can they join in the fun rather than just being like given the thing? So, you know, programming really should be driven by the residents' interests. I know earlier we talked about, how do you get to know the residents when they first move in? So important, because that really should be playing out through all the activities and experiences that the resident has during their time in the community. Do you see their skills, their personalities, not just like seasonal setups or, status quo type activities. So in your search, you're probably going to hear about the dimensions of wellness. So at Grace, we've narrowed that down to 4 focused pillars, which are part of our Vibrant Living program, which is our life enrichment program in our active adult, independent, and assisted living communities. So the 4 pillars that we've narrowed it down to are purpose. These are activities that contribute in a meaningful way to our residents, not things they just attend, things that they can lead and, grow and develop through. Curiosity, are there things that, are helping them learn brand new skills, explore new ideas, being connected to the outside world. Our third pillar is creativity. This goes beyond just arts and crafts. Is it their writing, photography, mixology classes even. And then fun, which a lot of the things we do are fun, regardless of which category they fit into. But, the fun really should be not just something they watch, although, it's great to just be entertained sometimes, but, can they participate, So instead of just a performance, can they actually do the karaoke? We want to see all that type of variety in a great calendar. So those are green flags to look for. Some red flags, really paying attention to the way the staff speaks. So important. Are the staff speaking words that talk about what they do for the residents, as opposed to, what the residents do and lead? Because the calendar should not be my calendar from the perspective of the life enrichment director. It's the residents' calendar. And, really ask if you can have a calendar. I mean, that's such a great thing. Take one home with you and look it through. And I'm going to go over a little bit more in a bit, but these are really important things to realize. And let's just go to the next slide so I can just talk through some of that a little bit more. Yeah, so ask to see that calendar, take one home, look it through, look for things, is it just filler, things like morning coffee, conversation time, or are the programs intentional? And do they have names that tell you more about who actually lives in that community? And then watch the staff. So do they know residents' names? Are they greeting them by name when they walk by? Um, do they talk about residents with respect and kindness? The residents stop and give them a hug while you're on the tour. Those are all really great signs to look out for. And look for resident presence in the community. So as you're walking around, in the art room, is there art displayed that was created by the residents? We have quilting clubs in some communities. Do you see them on display? The pride that the community has in what they are creating. Do you see clubs going on? Are there boards with faces, a veterans wall with all the veterans hanging on the wall? And are people out and about? So important to see. Do people want to be out and about in this community? And as you're looking around, also look at the spaces. Are there opportunities for spontaneous activity? So is there a spot where you can sit and play a game? Sit and talk with family, pick weeds if you're a plant girl like me, look for those opportunities throughout. Um, and then also ask about personalization. Again, how does a team learn what someone you care about is interested in? So very important to ask that. And just really wrapping this up real quick, the community that sees your loved one as a person with a history and a future, and not just a senior that has needs, that's the community that's worth choosing. So.
Thank you, Jennifer. I'd like to now turn things over to Abby Romaine, Vice President of Growth Marketing at Grace Management. Abby brings experience from across the senior living industry and has also personally navigated the decision-making process with family members, giving her both professional expertise and a lived experience. So Abby, I'll turn it over to you.
Thanks, Haley. Thanks for the introduction. Just to add a little bit of context, I've spent a number of years in senior living on both the operator and the provider side. So I've seen it from a lot of different angles in addition to going through this process personally with my own family. And what's always stood out to me is not just how different communities can look and feel, but how emotional and complex the decision-making process is for families when you're going through this. So a big part of what drives me now is helping to break down some of that stigma so that people feel more comfortable exploring their options sooner, having a little bit more of a thoughtful process versus just making this decision when they absolutely have to. So with that perspective, I just want to start with something that we hear all the time, which is the question, am I doing this the right way? So whether you're exploring senior living options for yourself or for someone you love, the reality is this is something that most people are navigating for the very first time. You don't know what you don't know, and it can feel overwhelming very quickly. So what I've learned is that there's a lot of parts of this process that can feel uncomfortable, but it doesn't mean that they're wrong. So it's not wrong to take your time and to ask the honest, hard questions. And what you're really doing at the end of the day is just exploring whether life could feel better, more supported, easier day to day. So as you are going through this process of researching senior living options, I just encourage you to keep your focus on your why. When you're really looking through that lens, what could the right environment mean for myself or my family member? What could it create in terms of support, connection, peace of mind? So focus on your why as you're going through this. So I like to think about this process in a really simple way of what can make it harder versus what actually helps. So you'll see this broken down into 3 different areas: process, mindset, simple habits. So when it comes to process, what I see most often is families starting really wide, which is completely natural, but people tend to stay wide too long. So too many tours, especially when they're back-to-back visits, it gets exhausting. And that's when it starts to feel overwhelming or creates resistance to this potential big life shift. What works better is starting with your research, narrowing down your options, and then visiting 2 or 3 places together. So on that note of research, reviews. We're all looking at reviews all the time when we're making any sort of big purchase or big decision. Reviews can be helpful, but please keep in mind that they tend to show extremes. So it's more helpful to look for patterns as you're reading through reviews. Even better if you can get perspective from someone that you know and trust that lives locally, that can give you an unbiased personal opinion of their experience. That will go a long way. So when you're doing that process, doing that research first, narrowing it down, and then visiting just 2 or 3 places together, it does lead to more clarity and confidence in this decision-making process. On the idea of mindset, this is just as important to keep this mindset as you're walking through your senior living options. It's very, very normal for emotions like guilt and fear to show up along the way. But when they start driving your decisions, it starts to make the process harder. What really helps is to expect those emotions to show up. You are going to feel that way, but stay grounded in that why. Remember why you are exploring in the first place. What better support, easier daily life connection, and peace of mind could look like for you or for your loved one. And then habits. Just a few simple habits can make a big difference. So, first is taking notes, spacing your visits out, capturing what stands out to you with each visit, because otherwise everything will start to blur together really quickly. When you think about these simple steps through your process, it becomes more focused, clearer, and a lot more manageable.
And Abby, I think the recommendation to narrow options down to just 2 or 3 communities at a time makes so much sense, especially as someone like myself was a very hard time making decisions.
Absolutely. Yes. Yes. So when you're thinking about, we've talked a lot about first impressions. One simple framework to remember when you're looking beyond that first impression is it's not just about what you see on that visit, it's about what's happening across these 4 key areas. So when it comes to care and support, be thinking, be asking what happens here on a difficult day, not just a good day, because that's going to be the foundation of everything. When you're planning earlier, it gives you more choice and control as those needs change. When it comes to people and culture, be thinking, be asking, and observing, do people truly know and care about the residents here? That's what brings this environment to life for them. So it's not just about the aesthetics, it's about the people. Daily life and connection. Can I picture myself here or my loved one? Can I picture connection here? Make it personal. That personal fit is what matters most and shapes that day to day of a resident's life. And then when it comes to trust and connection, if you have an opportunity to speak to a real resident or a family member, just ask, what works well here? What would you change here? That's obviously your experience at a community is going to change over time. So just look for transparency, personalization, and a sense that people are truly listening. When these 4 areas, these 4 key pillars align, that's when a place really starts to feel like home.
Yeah, Abby, we've heard it mentioned a lot during the past hour to look beyond the first impression, right? That's what today's all about, is looking beyond the beautiful lobby. And it really just so important to take in all aspects of a community and not just the aesthetics.
That's right. That's right. So just in closing, a few things to keep in mind as you're going through this process. I would just call them kind of insider tips. Um, so observation, when you show up, you're not just there to tour, you're there to observe. So if you can show up early just to watch, amazing. Some of those valuable insights you'll get come from unscripted moments when people don't feel like they're on stage. So most communities are going to show you their highlights, but what really matters is how things feel when they're not just being presented to you. How are people interacting? Does the experience seem consistent? Of course, again, if you can talk to a real resident, not just an ambassador, a family member would be amazing. When it comes to staff, ask why people stay, not just asking about the turnover there, but if people have stayed there, if there's longevity, like Max talked about that amazing dining services person who's been there for over 30 years, why do people stay? That's a very important question. So again, you're looking at lifestyle fit, not just features. And then if you see big discrepancies in pricing, whether that's community to community or apartment to apartment, just ask why. It's very important to just always ask why. So for your mindset, remind yourself that there is no perfect way to do this. There, just trust what you're observing, ask honest questions, and take notes, because these communities are going to blur together, and that will help you get to that place where you have narrowed down your options. So at the end of the day, it is not about finding the most impressive community, but it is about finding the right fit. It is all very personal, and it is the people, the experience, consistency over time that are ultimately going to shape what life looks like living in a community. It's not about getting everything right. It's about what's right for you. So make sure you're asking those hard questions, pay attention to what you're experiencing and observing. And, just remember what you're looking for is a place where you or your loved one genuinely feel like they are at home. So Thank you, Haley and team, for letting me be part of this conversation today.
Thank you so much, Abby. And I know we are a few minutes over. We may even need a part two because all of this is just so important. But if there's one thing that I hope everyone takes away from today's discussion, it's that you don't have to have all the answers right away. Take your time, ask questions, trust what you observe, and focus on finding the community that feels right for you and your loved one. And if we did not get to your question today that you put in the Q&A, we will follow up via email. And we are already busy planning our next Grace Presents webinar, and we are in the process of finalizing the speaker lineup. While we can't share all the details just yet, we encourage you to scan the QR code on the left here and sign up for our newsletter so you'll be the first to know when registration opens. And to learn more about Grace Management, explore our resources, or find a community near you, please visit our website and you can scan the QR code on the right to do so. Thank you again to our incredible speakers and for all of you in attendance who took the time to join us today. We hope today's discussion has provided you with practical tools and greater confidence as you navigate the senior living journey. Thank you all.
Yeah.
Bye-bye.